And we would begin today by introducing our first speaker. I'm pleased to introduce the Honorable William Howell, Speaker of the Virginia House of Delegates. On January 8, 2003, Bill Howell was sworn in as the 54th Speaker of the Virginia House of Delegates. He leads nearly 400-year-old institution, the oldest continuous elected making body in the United States. First elected as a delegate in 1987, he represents the 28th House District, which includes parts of Stafford County and the city of Fredericksburg. Speaker Howell is involved in many legislative leadership and historic preservation activities. In 2010, Governor McDonnell named Speaker Howell as co-vice chairman of the Governor's Commission on Government Reform and Restructuring. Speaker Howell earned his Juris Doctorate from the University of Virginia School of Law and his bachelor's degree in Business Administration from the University of Richmond. The University of Richmond Alumni Association honored Mr. Howell in 2005 with presenting him their Distinguished Service Award. Please join me in welcoming Speaker Howell.
Thank you very much. Usually when I'm getting ready to speak and people stand up, it means they're leaving. I appreciate you hanging around for a moment. Catherine, thank you very much for that nice introduction and for your leadership and service as VACO president. I also commend Jim and Dean and Bo and everyone that's been involved in organizing yet another fine conference. I thought this morning, with 95 local governments and literally thousands of VACO members, I really need to sit down and talk to Jim and some of his people for pointers on how to keep people focused and listening to you. When I first became speaker, people would ask me, well, what's it like being Speaker of the House? And I said, well, it's like herding cats. And I would say that for a while, and then one day I got a letter from PETA. And they objected to the fact that I was comparing legislators and cats. They said, cats are somewhat intelligent, they're clean, and if you continue to compare cats with your legislators, we're going to have to sue you. So now I tell people, and this is safer, I guess, that being Speaker of the House is like being the night watchman at a cemetery. You have a lot of people under you, but very few of them are listening to you. And I'm going to deviate for a moment from my prepared remarks. As I got up this morning, I reflected that this is a very special holiday that we tend to kind of take for granted, tend to overlook. And of course, everyone here recognizes just how really significant Veterans Day is and the effort, the opportunity that we have to thank and remember all those hundreds of thousands, millions of men and women over the past 230 some years that have sacrificed, often beyond measure, so that we can have a free country, we can have a democracy that we can work through. So I'm going to ask if there are veterans here in the crowd, if they would please stand up for a minute so that we might be able to recognize you. We surely do appreciate what each of you have done and continue to do. When I think of the Virginia Association of Counties, I think of an opportunity that we have. Learning how to better serve our communities is really a bond that we each have, that we both have. We have different viewpoints, different backgrounds, different experiences, but there's a lot of wisdom and common sense that we can share among ourselves. And all of this wisdom and perspective in one place is a tremendous benefit for all of us. Finding new ways to innovate, to be creative, and to become even more effective in these times is the important work that you do. And it's really one of the benefits of this annual conference that makes it so worthwhile. This year's theme, as Catherine said, waves of change, oceans of opportunity, is an apt description of where localities and state government is these days, organizationally, certainly operationally, and even economically. Times continue to be tough for too many of our citizens. Jobs are still too scarce. Budgets remain tight at all levels of government. And yet I find that effective leaders at the local and state level are those who've tried to view these challenges and turn this great recession into an opportunity to reevaluate existing priorities and to enhance our overall performance. And working together, I would argue that we've navigated rather well through this roughest economic wave of change since the Great Depression. We've kept Virginia's unemployment rate below the national average. Core government services are intact. And we've addressed a number of tough challenges to improve the long-term outlook of our finances. Incidentally, I'm going to talk a little bit about finances as I go through this, and you've got a great opportunity to hear the man that knows more about finances in Virginia than I dare say anyone else in this room, Rick Brown, our Secretary of Finance. And I told Rick as I came in to please not correct too much of what I said, but he is truly a gem that we are so fortunate to have working for us at the cabinet level. Obviously, effective working relationships require trust, listening, a willingness to communicate, and open dialogue. And that's one of the reasons I'm here today and have been here on prior occasions. I really do respect your ideas and experiences. Now, that's not to say that we're always going to agree on things all the time. Such isn't the case within my caucus. It's not the case between the House and the Senate. Not actually always the case in my family. Every now and then, Ceci will agree with me, but that's why it's so important to remember, as VACO does in its lobbying and legislative efforts, that we are all human, and at its heart, the legislative process is about people, individuals having an idea, sifting through the pros and cons of that idea with stakeholders, refining the concept with experts so that it's ready to be introduced as a bill, and then talking with others and explaining to them why the bill is a good one, building support with delegates and senators so they'll vote for it, and with the governor so he'll sign it. Common sense dictates that it's easier to persuade somebody that you know and with whom you have a relationship. Working well with the General Assembly also requires an ability to cut to the chase. More paper and more emails aren't always better. You all, like us, are citizen legislators, and you all, like us, have many varied demands on our times. And just like each one of you, every leader here and every senator and every delegate wants to do what's best for Virginia. That's the bottom line. Now, there's an opportunity to put these and other lessons learned to work, starting with the upcoming 2013 General Assembly session. And let's begin with the economic and budgetary outlook for Virginia. Are we going to have more of the same? The optimist in me says, I hope not. But the realist in me says, let's prepare for the worst and hope for the best. This recovery has zigzagged over the past 3 years since the official end of the recession. And the good news is that the U.S. economy is growing. The bad news is it's growing at such a slow pace that the lack of job creation makes it feel like we're still in a recession. Nationally, unemployment remains elevated at just under 8%, and actually it's higher because so many people have dropped out of the workforce. They're not looking for jobs. Companies continue to hoard cash, in part because of uncertain economic recovery and unclear taxing and regulatory policies coming out of Washington, and also the problem that a lot of companies are having accessing credit. Consumers have generally remained cautious, spending primarily on replacement items, such as automobiles. And the housing recovery, although it's shown a little bit of life recently, there are still too many homeowners that remain underwater or upside down with negative or near negative equity mortgages. In Virginia, our economy has done better than most states, and that's good. But lately, key data and sectors tell a more mixed story. Initially, after the recession, Virginia's economy outperformed the nation as a whole. However, since May of 2011, Virginia's percentage of job growth has performed below the U.S. by nearly 0.3 percentage points. And I think a lot of that is due to the fact that there's still this uncertainty in federal spending, and that sent a chilling effect on private sector businesses and employers. There's a very high level of budget uncertainty at the federal level, and that high level is also adversely affecting state and local government leaders like us, who are trying to prioritize and put together our budgets. That uncertainty can be defined in two ways. It's the threat of federal budget sequestration. You know, in Virginia this year, and for the next couple of years, we've been celebrating or commemorating the sesquicentennial of the American Civil War, and it took me about 150 years to learn how to pronounce sesquicentennial, and now I've got to work on sequestration. But it's a threat that is very real and very significant. And in addition to the sequestration threat, of course, we have the potential fiscal crash resulting from the federal government taking states like us, all of us, over a cliff. Many of you know all about sequestration, more than I probably care to know, but it's the real title of sequestration, or the real name of it, is the Federal Budget Control Act of 2011. And you remember the Congress passed and the President signed this bill into law in August of 2011, and it came about as a result that acknowledged that the senators and the congressmen and members of the House and the executive branch were basically unable to come to some sort of pathway to dealing with this tremendous fiscal crisis that we were facing because of the trillions of dollars of debt that we were putting on our balance sheet every year. And the agreement allows $2.1 trillion, allowed a $2.1 trillion increase in the federal debt ceiling in exchange for budget reductions in two main pots. Pot one has got about $917 billion in it. And that's federal discretionary spending that we are to cap over the next 10 years. $917 billion in federal discretionary spending that's going to be capped over the next 10 years. Pot number two is the one that we're probably more concerned about. That's $1.2 trillion in spending cuts, including interest that will be saved by these spending cuts over a 10-year period. And this again came about as a result of the failure of that super committee to determine where to make these reductions by the deadline last year. And that set in motion sequestration, which is going to take place on January 2nd, 2013, unless Congress and the President act to intervene. The $1.2 trillion in spending cuts, which is really $984 billion, plus the interest that they'll save by not spending through those cuts, is split, that $984 billion is split 50-50 between $492 billion in defense discretionary cuts and $492 billion in non-defense discretionary cuts. And for 2013, the federal budget cuts for most discretionary programs are going to be achieved automatically, canceling a portion of their budgetary resources starting in January, called a sequester. On the defense side, about a third of those cuts is exempt, and it's mostly military pay or personnel salaries. So the bulk of the cuts is going to come from programs and procurements, submarines, aircraft carriers, computers, so very much more. Some experts have estimated that these defense cuts of this magnitude could mean a potential loss of up to 200,000 jobs in Virginia. And that's why so many of us want to stop these automatic cuts. Not only would they cost jobs and devastate our economy, but they're going to also harm U.S. national security. Our House Appropriations and Finance Committees meet this week to discuss these matters in greater detail. The point I want to make to you all is that please understand and bear in mind that these cuts in federal defense spending are going to have broad implications for Virginia's economy. Virginia is the #1 recipient on a per capita basis of federal procurement spending and federal defense spending. Defense spending in Virginia totals more than $6,500 per capita per year. And that's 4.3 times the national average, and it accounts for about 11% of all defense spending nationally. Federal defense spending in Northern Virginia and in Hampton Roads is about 40% of their economies. So you can see the magnitude of this cut. In addition to sequestration, the potential federal fiscal cliff that looms is equally concerning. In December of 2012, December 31st, the tax cuts that were enacted by Congress in 2001, 2003, and 2010 go away. Also in December of 2012, the 2% payroll tax cut ends. That means in January, employers are going to have to pay an additional 2% for each of their employees. Unemployment insurance extension ends. Medicare payment rates reductions begin. That all takes place December 31st if nothing is done. January 2nd, sequestration cuts go into effect. February of 2013, the $6 trillion debt ceiling that we negotiated a year and a half ago hits the roof, hits the ceiling again. And in March of 2013, the continuing budget resolution ends. So there's an awful lot that's going to be happening over the next 4 months. And the repercussions are just incredibly dramatic. The Congressional Budget Office has estimated that going over this fiscal cliff, not even considering sequestration, will push the U.S. economy back into a second recession. In light of the uncertain economics and budgetary outlook, and because of the threat of federal sequestration and this fiscal cliff, spending restraint is still going to be the rule of the 2013 session. I hope I'm still around when I can come to this group and say, hey, it's going to be a great year. We're going to be able to do a lot for you. But we haven't been able to do that for the last several years, and 2013 is not going to be any different. While the total fiscal year 2012 state general fund revenues performed a little better than expected, tax collections continue to grow at below trend levels. Already we're seeing a continued weakness in Virginia's job market. And it's based on caution, based on uncertainty that the businesses have. Their caution in hiring and expanding, in turn, makes any bump in income tax revenue unlikely. Some of the major potential budget issues for the 2013 session that we're going to be discussing at the House Money Committee retreat this week include Medicaid utilization, inflation forecasts, the U.S. Department of Justice agreement, and ID waiver waiting list, higher education enrollment, growth and base adequacy, debt service, maintenance reserve needs, perhaps eliminating the remaining accelerated sales tax that we introduced a couple of years ago to try and fill a hole, and also filling any other holes that might have come up in the first year budget. You can see how spending restraint will continue to be the rule of the 2013 General Assembly session. And again, the unknown impact of the Federal Budget Control Act, or sequestration, on Virginia is a huge factor that is weighing on us. Many say that it's unlikely for the President and Congress to address the issue of sequestration prior to the January 2nd, 2013 deadline. But if changes are made, and I hope they will be made, they'll likely occur during the General Assembly session. Remember, Virginia is the first state in the country to complete its budget deliberations. We start early and we work for a short period of time, and we have our budgets done hopefully by the end of February. And that session schedule makes it even harder for the governor and the General Assembly to make adjustments to backfill cuts, which may come into effect through sequestration. Some of the other issues that we'll be dealing with in the General Assembly session, this is our short session coming up, thankfully, and there's been a lot of interest in K through 12 reform. The governor's had a task force that's been working on it. We have several people within the caucuses that are very involved with it, and I hope we're going to see continue to see some significant reform in K through 12. As you may remember, maybe where over the past year or two, we've been approaching higher education, and we've dedicated a fair amount of new money to higher education, in addition with some more accountability standards to try and deal with this ever-increasing tuition problem that everyone has, but Virginia certainly has, as well as everyone else. Well, I hope we can have some of the same type of results in K through 12 reform. We're also going to be looking, I think, at transportation. Some people think that's still an issue. We've been working on government reform. I think there's going to be an emphasis on regulatory reform in this session. I continue to feel a need for addressing Virginia retirement system reform. We've taken some steps, kind of nibbled around the edges, but our Virginia retirement system, as you all know, is like, it's a defined benefit plan, like Social Security, and like Social Security in its present form is unsustainable. We need to address that. And it's not always easy. I think in the long run it'll be best for everybody. In addition to K-12 and transportation, education, I'm expecting I hope there's going to be a renewed interest in removing more mandates on local governments. I'm pausing for the applause line. You know, when I was here a couple of years ago, we talked about that, and I sort of asked you all to help, give me ideas of unnecessary mandates that at the local government level you see and you wonder, why do we have this, and this costs us money and time. And I didn't get a lot of response. I got a couple that said, well, you need to get rid of this, it costs us $500 million, or we need to do this, it's $132 million. We're probably not going to be able to do too many of those this year, but I'm sure there are issues that you all have, and you say, why in the heck do we have to fill out these forms, or report this or do that? And again, I'd love to hear from you on it, and see what we can do to try and make your life a little bit easier. I think more than anything else that I say here today, I want you to know that we do value local governments. We do value this strong, healthy relationship that many of us have with our respective counties. My home county of Stafford, local leaders there are working hard, as they are all over the Commonwealth. I'm just a little more familiar with what they're doing in Stafford. They've taken to heart, I think, VACO's conference theme for Stafford really is becoming a community of opportunities. In 2010, the Stafford Board adopted a 10-point economic development plan, which outlined their vision for the community. And the board has been very aggressive in adopting the practices within this economic plan, cutting taxes, reducing spending, increasing reserves, and placing a focus on job-creating economic development. And I think these efforts are paying dividends for our citizens and community. Conservative revenue estimates, along with prudent spending and continued pursuit of economic development opportunities, has led to about a $5.1 million positive result of operations for our fiscal year 2012 budget. Standard & Poor's last year enhanced our bond rating. Last month, Fitch upgraded the county's bond rating. The average residential tax bill has decreased by about 11% adjusted for inflation over the past 5 years. And we've been able to continue funding for the community's priorities, including public safety and education. And of course, economic development continues to be one of Stafford's strongest assets. We have over 2,200 businesses in the county. Stafford just recently opened up a community development service center, which is a one-stop shopping process focusing on helping businesses and individuals that are through the development and permitting process. According to VEC, Virginia Employment Commission, Stafford had the second highest job growth rate in Virginia from 2006 to 2011. And as a result, about 38,000 people can say they work in Stafford. We've long been a bedroom community where people commute north to Tyson's Corner, Washington, D.C. And we've had a real focus on trying to provide good jobs for people so that they don't have to take that brutal commute every day. And one of the things that I'm excited about, we just opened up the first classroom at the Stafford Research and Technology Park at the Quantico Corporate Center. And it's a first step towards developing this research park. It's going to focus on law enforcement, the military, and the intelligence community. Both the intelligence community and law enforcement through the FBI have major footprints in the Quantico area where this research center is going to be. Stafford has partnered with George Mason University, the University of Mary Washington, and Germanna Community College to teach classes there this fall. And likewise, I'm sure your localities are doing a lot of good things to create more opportunities. In the 2013 session, I'm hopeful that we can help with these kind of efforts. My colleagues and I will be working during the 2013 session on important issues like K-12 reform, government reform, transportation, and of course, budget amendments. We hope to engage local government leaders and work collaboratively with VACO and other stakeholder groups. You know, that's Governor McDonald, I'm busy right now, okay? He's always calling me. We realize that changes to public education, transportation, and other budget funding issues have broad and innumerable impacts at the local government level. And in keeping with the theme of your retreat, let's all work hard to make this session an opportunity to strengthen our relationships. I always, very sincerely say this, look forward to having the benefit of VACO's helpful input and ongoing dialogue. Now, at this meeting, this has been a wonderful opportunity. And of course, at your annual legislative day, which will be January 31st this year in Richmond. By working together as strong partners, serving our citizens, we can pursue important reforms for our public education system, serve the specific needs of our communities, and emerge from this economic uncertainty as a stronger and better Commonwealth of opportunity. Thank you very much for allowing me to be with you here today. I really have enjoyed the opportunity.